So I feel like this review is gonna get me to lose some subscribers, and I imagine I'm going to have quite a few dislikes on this video. So I'm talking today about Eastward, and usually I try to get reviews out early, and a lot of times when I do these reviews, I also like to write a script, but I can't do that with this game, and there's a couple reasons why. Partially because I was really excited for this game, and I'm torn on it. Very torn on it. But we'll get into it. So, Eastward comes from the development team Chucklefish. It released mid-month here in September. And oddly enough, a lot of people haven't really talked about it. I think it's because the game really came off a little bit different than what people thought it was going to be. So, the game was kind of sold as a Zelda-esque kind of action-adventure game. And that's not what this game is. There's elements of it, for sure. But it's not simplistic like a Legend of Zelda game. And like a lot of action-adventure games. For instance, the game capture that I did for the video, I spent an hour and a half going through dialogue to get to a point where I could actually start getting real gameplay. A lot of it just would have been dialogue. And I'm not kidding, I'm not over exaggerating. It was an hour and a half. And at this point, I'm about 7 hours in the game. And so this entire just process of getting gameplay footage took over 3 hours. I know that because it was a Monday night and I was watching football, and I started it right as the game started. And a little past halftime, which is about an hour and a half, is when I actually got to gameplay because there was so much dialogue. And that's what this game does. There is a ton of dialogue, a ton of story, and that can be received either really well or really poorly. I'm torn on it myself. I think a lot of the story is important and it's interesting, and I think it's done really well. I love the writing. I think it's super creative. The game itself focuses on two main characters, John and Sam. John is the old dude with the big goatee. Sam's a little girl with little white hair. And it starts simple enough and basic enough where you live in this underground world where you're told that anything above ground is evil and bad, and there's nothing but monsters or decay up there. And essentially, once you go up there, you're done for. That's it. That's oblivion. It's all over. And so you kind of navigate that situation with these characters. One thing that comes up pretty early is that Sam has already seen above ground, and she knows that there's blue skies and green grass, and it's beautiful up there. And she ends up leading John to discover this as well. And the game completely opens up from there, and you start to learn about the mayor of that underground town, and you start learning about nefarious actions that are going on, and then you start expanding it from there, going out to other nefarious people and issues that go on, and an entirely new world for you to learn about and do tons of quests and have lots of fun that way. The actual gameplay itself is pretty simple. You as John, you have control of a few weapons. A frying pan is the thing you start off with. Early enough, you get a gun, and it's all controlled with one button. You can either hold the button and then release it for like a big hit, or just hit it once. Now, it isn't a button masher, though. That's one thing to be clear on. There is a rhythmic kind of combat to it. Now, as Sam, you have this special ability where you can kind of arrest enemies in a certain place. You can run by them. You can also cause like magical, things to happen with your power as well. It doesn't actually do much damage, but it is very helpful in the game and in the puzzle solving. And that's a lot of this game actually is puzzle solving and dungeon diving. And it's very simple and well done, and I like that gameplay. It much reminds me of Legend of Zelda, like the early ones. And that aspect of the game is amazing. I think a lot of people who like retro games and who like Legend of Zelda style action adventure games are going to really enjoy that aspect of the game. Not to mention the combat, the boss fights The boss fights are amazingly fun. Like, I haven't had so much fun in boss fights because they had this element of a puzzle on how to actually take down the boss, but they don't make it so complex that you get frustrated. They kind of open up the door for you, so you can kind of see how to do it, and you just have to learn, much like a rogue style, because that's another thing to comment about the combat. It's also pretty difficult. It's not uncommon for you to die multiple times in a dungeon, but each time you do, you learn and gain from that. The graphics of the game are, they're pixel. They're classic pixel. It's done really well. It's very bright, very vibrant, very clear. I think that the atmosphere and the environment is really beautiful. There's, in fact, the area that the gameplay footage is from. I really, really like it. I really like the whale that's just like randomly on top of a building, and things of that nature. Really, really like the graphic style. I think they did great with it. I don't think one thing that I don't think enough people talk about is how endearing Sam is. A very cute little girl that you almost just want to know more about, and you want to know. And trust me, there's a lot to learn about that character. But in that aspect, I love the character design. John is probably the most least likable character. And I'm not just talking about between John and Sam. I'm talking about with the NPCs as well. There's so many NPCs in this game that have their own individual life to them. And you want to explore and know more about them. And that's where the dialogue comes in. Because you wouldn't get any of that if not for the dialogue. At the same time, the yin to that yang is the fact that I don't know. It's hard to fire up a game just to read for an hour. If you've got an hour and a half, you expect to at least get somewhere a little bit in a game. But more often than not, with Eastward, I was reading for a majority of that time. And I was interested in it, and it was fun, sort of. I'm not much of a reader, and when it comes to games, I feel like I want to explore and fight and do all that stuff. It's kind of difficult when you know that maybe an hour to an hour and a half is going to be reading. Now, what really, I think, hurts this game, aside from the long dialogue, and I think this could also fix the dialogue issue, is multiple save points and more save points. Because that was the issue for me at times. I would want to play the game. I'd start it up, and before I knew it, I was stuck in an area where it could be another 30 minutes to an hour before I could save. I didn't want to lose all of the dialogue that I just went through. I didn't want to have to restart and reread all that again. I didn't want to have to redo the dungeon that I'm in. And so I'd have to play through it. And at times it was really just impractical for what I was doing, like whether it be with kids or work or whatever. And then knowing that, I'm stuck in this game until I get to that save point. I feel like either they could just add more save points or have it where you can save from like the start menu, something like that. I think that would change this game night and day for me. Because part of my issue with the game is the fact that as soon as I started it, I knew I was kind of trapped in that game for a while. And at the very least, it was going to be in an hour that I was going to be kind of stuck in this like loop of dialogue, of dungeon crawling, and with no real escape, and knowing that at any one point, if I lose the progress I've already had, it could be 20, 30 minutes of dialogue I'm going to have to read through to get back to where I was. And I also know me, and I know that there's a good part of me that's not going to play it again. If I have to go back through an hour and a half like I did with the gameplay, I don't think I would play it. I would just stop and be done with it. Anyway, that's my thoughts on Eastward. I think it's a good game, like a really great game. I just think it's far more story, it's far more reading than a lot of people have anticipated, and I think there's more of that complexity to the game than what has been noted. It's definitely not like a Zelda clone. It's not any of that. It's its own game. I've heard people compare it to Final Fantasy VII, like the old school, and I don't think that's even comparable. Like, even that game was more combat and more, I don't know, it was less story, more exploration. This game is both has a lot of both of those elements in there, but there is a ton more story than in a lot of games I've played. Anyway, that's my take on it. I enjoy it. I like it. I'm playing it. I wouldn't say it's, I don't know. It's not the game I thought it was, but that's not always a bad thing. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys. Take care.